Have you ever wondered what happens to a man when he steps away from the world for a decade? Not just a retreat, not a pause, but a full surrender to solitude. What cracks open inside him when there are no voices but his own, no faces but the ones he conjures in the dark? Does he unravel, or does he find something the rest of us have forgotten? Imagine a man who vanishes into the silence, not out of despair, but as an experiment, to see what remains when everything else is stripped away. And what returned after those 10 years was not a ghost, not a shell, but something unbelievable. We live in a world that treats solitude like a wound. We patch it with distractions, drown it in noise, fear it like a hollow in the chest. But what if the hollow isn't empty? What if it's a doorway? The ancient mystics knew this. They walked into deserts, climbed mountains not to escape life, but to meet it in its rawest form. To meet themselves without the masks the world insists they wear. And the man who spent a decade alone, he didn't just survive the silence. He unearthed a truth so simple, it shakes the foundations of everything we've been taught about connection, about purpose, about who we really are. This is not a story about loneliness. This is about what happens when a man stops running from himself, when he stops begging the world to tell him who he is and instead turns inward, like a miner descending into his own depths. What he finds there isn't what he expected. It's not gold, not light, not some gleaming treasure. It's darker, heavier, more real. It's the weight of his own unfiltered existence. The Stoics called this the obstacle, the thing you fear that becomes the forge. The 10 years solitude was his forge. And what emerged? Let's begin there, at the edge of that revelation. Picture him in those early years. The world's voices still echo in his skull. You'll go mad. You'll wither. You need people to be whole. But he stays, and slowly the echoes fade. What replaces them is terrifying. Silence, yes, but not the kind you hear, the kind you feel. A silence that peels back layers like skin from fruit until only the pit remains. And the pit is hard, unyielding, alive. This is the first unbelievable thing. Solitude doesn't erase him. It reveals him. Strip away every role, every expectation, and what's left? Not nothing. Something that doesn't need applause to exist. By year 5, the questions change. It's no longer, can I endure this? But what else have I been wrong about? He starts to see the illusions he'd mistaken for truth, that love is salvation, that belonging is safety, that he was ever incomplete to begin with. The world sells us these stories like oxygen, but in the silence, he learns to breathe without them. And here's the second unbelievable thing. The less he needs, the more he has. Not possessions, not status, but a quiet, unshakable knowing, a compass calibrated to his own north. No one gave it to him. No one can take it away. Then the crisis, year 7. The silence becomes a mirror, and in it, he sees everything. The scars he's ignored, the lies he's told himself, the parts of his soul he's bartered away for scraps of validation. It's unbearable. He wants to smash the mirror, flee back to the noise, but he doesn't. And this is the third unbelievable thing. The moment he stops resisting, the mirror becomes a window. Beyond it, not answers, but better questions. Who am I when no one is watching? What do I truly want when no one is offering? What remains when I stop pretending? By year 10, the transformation is complete. He steps back into the world, But he's not the same man. He's quieter, sharper, like a blade honed in the dark. People expect him to be broken, feral, but he's neither. He's alive in a way that unsettles them, because he carries something rare, the weight of his own truth. And here's the final unbelievable thing. The world, which once pitied his solitude, now leans in. They ask, "What did you find out there?" He smiles, not because he won't tell them, but because no words could capture it. How do you explain the taste of water to a fish? And now, a question for you. What would you find if you faced your own silence for 10 days, let alone 10 years? Not the curated silence of meditation apps, but the real thing, the kind that strips you bare. Would you crumble? Or would you, against all odds, discover something unbelievable too? Like and subscribe if you want to go deeper. This is only the beginning. The story doesn't end here, because the man who spent a decade alone didn't just return with answers, he returned with a fire that doesn't burn but illuminates. And the world, desperate for light, gathers around it. They ask him to speak, to teach, to spill his secrets. But the real secret is this: the fire was always there. It just took 10 years of silence for him to see it, to feel its heat without flinching. There's a moment in every great transformation when the old self begins to dissolve. Like salt in water, it doesn't vanish. It becomes something else entirely. The man who spent 10 years alone didn't just pass time in silence. He underwent an alchemy, an unseen, irreversible shift where the weight of his own presence became the only gravity he needed. And what emerged wasn't just resilience. It was something closer to revelation. Consider this. We spend our lives building shelters against loneliness, relationships, careers, identities, all constructed like walls against the wind. But the man who walks into solitude, he lets the walls crumble. He stands naked in the storm and waits. At first, it's agony. The wind carves into him sharp as a blade, but then slowly, something miraculous happens. He realizes the wind isn't trying to destroy him. It's trying to sculpt him. And the parts it strips away, they were never his to begin with. This is the paradox no one tells you about solitude. The more you surrender to it, the less alone you feel. Because loneliness isn't the absence of people. It's the absence of yourself. The man who spent a decade in silence didn't lose connection. He found it. A connection so deep it rewired his understanding of existence. He no longer needed mirrors to prove he was real. His own breath became the confirmation, the rustle of leaves, the pulse of his blood. These were the only validations he required. And here's where the story twists. Society warns us that isolation breeds madness. But what if the opposite is true? What if madness is what happens when we avoid ourselves? When we drown out the voice of our soul with the static of the world? The man who stayed alone for 10 years discovered this firsthand. The voices in his head didn't grow louder, they grew clearer. And one day, they distilled into a single question. Who would you be if no one was watching? Think about that. Really think, who are you when the performance ends? When the applause fades and the masks come off? Most of us never find out. We keep the curtains drawn, the stage lit, the audience seated. But the man in our story, he canceled the show. He stepped off the stage and into the dark. And in that dark, he found something astonishing. a self that didn't need to be seen to exist. This is the second unbelievable truth. Solitude doesn't shrink you. It expands you, like a star collapsing inward only to explode into a supernova. The man who spent 10 years alone didn't wither. He ignited, and the light he gave off wasn't for others. It was for himself. A light so bright it cast no shadow, no duality, no contradiction, just pure, undiluted being. Now, another question for you. What would you see if you stepped off your own stage? If you sat in the silence long enough to hear your soul speak? Would it whisper or would it roar? Stay with me. We're just getting to the heart of it. Like and subscribe if you want to go deeper. Because here's what happens next in our story. The man doesn't just return to the world with insights. He returns with eyes that see differently. He looks at the bustling crowds, the frantic striving, the desperate grasping for meaning, and he understands something terrifying. Most people aren't running toward happiness. They're running from themselves. And the things they chase, love, success, validation, are just mile markers on a road that leads in circles. This is the cruel joke of modern existence. We're taught that fulfillment lies outside us, that we're incomplete until some external force, a partner, an achievement, a revelation, clicks the last piece into place. But the man who spent a decade alone knows the truth. The piece was never missing. It was just buried under the noise. So I ask you again, how much noise are you willing to turn off? How much of yourself are you willing to meet in the silence? The story isn't over, because the most unbelievable part isn't what he found in solitude. It's what happened when he brought it back to the world.